When I met Lottie and found out she was the head of change at BNZ for a long time, that excited me even more because it meant that I had an ally, so to speak, or somebody who was immersed in the craft of change to come and take the concept of the ECD and actually give it, funnily enough, some credibility in the change space, but also add some depth and some structure to these conversations.
Hi everybody, thank you for dialing in today. So I'm going to take you through this presentation that is changing the F word. So when you think of the word change, what is the first word that comes to mind? This is a circle of trust, so don't worry about what you put in there. Anything goes. Love it. Adapt, constant, excitement. Oh, I love it when people put excitement in. Progress, fear. So you can see the perspective of change is really, really wide. There's such a wide perspective that is held when we think of the word change. And I think really that, if you keep that in mind, that's a real foundation for what we're looking at when we look at emotions in terms of how they relate to change. And so what we'll cover today is we'll talk about change and the F word. Hopefully you know that it's feelings, and discuss what, feelings and emotions as a key success factor in the challenge of change. So we'll look at how we get intentional about emotions during change to ensure that we cultivate the feelings that support change success. And then I've kind of built this canvas that I've used in terms of, how do you actually apply some theory into practice when you're approaching a change? The research that is showing us that, emotions at work drive behavior and performance. They impact on how people perform tasks, how engaged and creative they are, how committed they are to their organization, their team, their role, and also how they make decisions. And the employees also tend to be less likely to burn out. They're more likely to not leave. The staff retention is better. So there's so many different statistics that support it in the research that's out there at the moment. And change in particular is a hothouse of emotions in the workplace. And in the face of change, our emotional part of the brain takes over, and it can trigger a stress response. But we have something in our brain called the negativity bias. And the negativity bias means that we're 5 times more likely to see change as a negative rather than a positive. In actual fact, we're 5 times more likely to think negative thoughts than positive thoughts. So this is what we're dealing with when we go into change, okay? So we're already on the back foot. Organizations are adaptive. They are constantly doing initiatives. They have to, otherwise they will die. However, they still neglect the emotional process of change very often. So what I'd like to do now is a little bit of an exercise, and I'd like you to think about a change that you have been impacted by and that it went well. Okay, so it was a positive, it was a pleasant experience. There was something about it that was smooth. I'd like you to select 3 cards that best describe how you felt. And if those cards don't appear on the slides, then maybe you have one that isn't and you can insert your own. So, I'm getting you to really tune in to how you're feeling. Would anybody like to share their top 3? Hi, Gail, would you like to share yours? Thank you.
I'd gone through voluntary redundancy at work, and I was in the change space in one of the big banks in Melbourne.
Oh.
And I'd been wanting to go for a long time, and I'd actually been on redundancy and they kept stopping me going. And eventually, when I got the call that they would let me go, I went through this huge excitement. So I felt free, and I was like, finally I can get out. It was a whole weight had lifted off my shoulders. So I felt really at ease. So that was fantastic. And I felt really confident that I'd made the right decision.
That's such a great story, and how it can change your future landscape just by having those emotions and holding them and feeling them. We're going to flip it now, and we're going to go to the other side. And there's normally a lot more war stories, unfortunately, when it comes to this. So I want you to think about an example of change that didn't go well, and it was an unpleasant experience. Thinking about the attributes as well of what would have possibly made it that way. And now we're going to look at these lovely white cards and look at what were the 3 cards that best describe how you felt through that process and maybe why. The reason I put this at the start is I think it really gets us connected with why emotions matter during change. I could go through the research, but you're having the experience of it. You're thinking about the experience of it. So would anybody like to share their war story of change and their 3 emotions that they labelled against that?
Maybe about 12 years ago, we had a big change at New Zealand College of Fitness, where I was a lecturer, and they decided to totally change the curriculum and sort of merge it with this other organisation. And as lecturers, they didn't really keep us in the loop at all of what was coming or how to deliver the new curriculum. And on Friday, they sent us this big info pack of everything we had to teach and deliver as of Monday morning. So I felt quite powerless. There was no time to prepare and really defensive, and then actually just quite incapable and inferior.
And you know, if you're trying to get any senior executive or sponsor of the change on board with why emotions are important, why you need to come at it from this angle, get them to do this exercise. Because as soon as they do this exercise and they feel it for themselves, they're going to be on board once they go through this, because you do feel it. It's that felt sense in the body. And so many of you have heard of the change curve, but under the surface of those stages is emotions. Is everybody with me so far? Because this is when we kind of get really into the kind of workshopy element of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to start to think about how we want our stakeholders to feel. So we'll start by going through the emotions, and then we're going to get to the canvas. And I want you to think about how you want people impacted by this change to feel. Like, how do you want them to feel? Now I want you to think about same change, same people, but how do you not want them to feel? For people to go through a change in kind of a workplace setting and not have any of those white cards come up, it's very rare. So this is the reality of change, and acknowledging them is so important. So what 3 would you choose for how you don't want people to feel? What are the ones you think are the most likely to come up that need to be managed? The ones that possibly are going to be the most detrimental if they come up as well. But what I want to show you now, which is probably what you're keen to look at, is the change canvas that I've created of how to map this out. So I'll just walk you through quickly, and I've put my kind of top 5 in there as an example. So the first thing that we look through when we look at this canvas is we've got our top 5, but what are the signs and signals that people are feeling that way? So how would that show up in the workplace? So very similar to empathy. The next part is what I call behaviors. If you think back to the change curve, and I said it was kind of like this roller coaster, the behaviors that show up in terms of leaders, sponsors and change champions are either a tailwind through that curve, they will assist people to get to commitment, or they are a headwind. They're going to stop people getting to that point of, adopting, accepting. And then we look at actions and rituals. Okay. And I'll talk a little bit about the bit at the bottom, which is really important towards the end. So this is what the canvas looks like. And now we're going to walk through it. So you should have your desired feelings and your undesired feelings. So what I'd like you to think about now is I'd like you to think about signs and signals that people might be feeling your desired emotions, okay? And also you could think about your undesired as well. As you go through these, if you're a change practitioner, what it will do is it will just really put a lot of weight behind the stuff that you've been lobbying for. So have a think about what kind of behaviors you want to see from leaders, sponsors and change champions. I've come from that angle because to me, they are the most influential people as we go through change. And then as you go through that, what are the practical things you can do to help cultivate those desired feelings? Hopefully you could see how looking at the behaviors, the actions just drop out the bottom. If it's a journey that you're going through and each step informs the next part. And I don't think I was in your group where I said that this also informs your leadership culture. Is your leadership culture a leadership culture that is assisting your change or working against it? Does it need to be tweaked so that it's more change positive or, change synergistic? So this is my completed canvas, just to give you an idea. I've just a hypothetical. I haven't brought a particular change in mind, but what I've done is kind of thought generally around many of the changes that I've dealt with over the time. I have put things to the tailwind behavior that I talked about before: role modeling, being present, listening, being upfront about setbacks, taking time to recognize efforts, poor communication, not listening. The opposites basically are the headwinds. And then looking out of it, like actions and rituals, looking what drops out of it. Team check-ins and celebration rituals, really important during change. Leaders and managers regularly shouting out efforts, adequate sponsor and leadership training. So leaders and sponsors are not trained on how to lead to change well. So that could be one of the key actions that comes out of this. And then things on the other side, I've got, look at what work can be stopped, regular pulse checks, providing appropriate support. In terms of things to preserve, things like regular staff catch-ups go off the radar when people are busy during change, but they're so important. And then things like team check-ins and stand-ups, so you can get an idea of how people are feeling. Stuff to let go of, what initiatives are going to be stopped, put on the backlog. We need to stop so much stuff in organizations. Cleaning up comms channels, halting all non-essential stuff that comes through, because you want the messages that are important to be listened to and heard. And so then what it starts to inform, I've just given an example going back to the change curve of some of the key things which are providing emotional support, guidance and direction, communication and information. For me, they are the three main themes of where to focus your time during change. If you focus your time there, the change will be landed better and managed better. And all it is doing is probably all these things about how important it is to the important actions during change. It's giving you credibility to lobby that with senior management so they give that priority. Hopefully it's given you a framework of how to use the emotional culture deck as we go through change. And thinking about what feelings is the change dependent on to make it a success.
Finally, thank you so much, Lottie. The work you're doing continues to inspire me, as you can see, on a daily basis. Thanks everybody for your interest and curiosity and intrigue. And I hope you're feeling inspired and brave and bold and want to go.